The shadow in the head count. My name is Elias. I work for a private forestry management firm in the dense, fog-heavy woods of the Maryland Panhandle. My job isn't as poetic as it sounds. Mostly, it's marking boundary lines and ensuring that local hiking trails don't drift into protected timber zones. I spend weeks at a time out here, living out of a canvas tent and a rugged 4x4. The woods in Maryland are different from the West. They're old, cramped, and filled with a thick, humid silence that feels like it's pressing against your lungs. Locals talk about the goat man or the woodsman, but to a guy like me, those were just campfire stories told to keep teenagers from drinking in the brush. Until 2 weeks ago, I was leading a small team of 4 interns college kids eager to get their field credits. We were doing a deep woods survey, 5 miles from the nearest fire road. The routine was strict. We worked until sundown, had a quiet dinner, and then I'd do a head count before we turned in. Okay, let's wrap it up, I called out as the sun began to bleed into a dark, bruised violet behind the oaks. We gathered around the fire pit. I did the count. 1, 2, 3, 4, and me, 5. Everything was normal. We ate in silence, the only sound being the crackle of dry hemlock branches and the distant, rhythmic hoot of an owl. But as the fire started to die down, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, that internal alarm that only goes off when the math of the forest doesn't add up. I looked across the fire. There was Julian, staring at his phone. There was Sarah, sharpening her knife. There was Marcus and Leo, whispering about the hike back. And then there was the 5th one, sitting just on the edge of the firelight. Slightly behind Marcus was a figure. It was wearing a high-visibility vest, just like ours. It had its hood up, and it was hunched over, staring intently at the embers. My heart skipped a beat. I did the count again in my head. Julian, Sarah, Marcus, Leo, me. That's 5. So, who was the 6th person sitting at our fire? Hey, Julian, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did we pick someone up from the survey crew near the creek? Julian looked up, confused. No, Elias. Just us. Why? I pointed a trembling finger toward the figure behind Marcus. But as soon as my hand moved, the figure shifted. It didn't stand up. It unfolded. Its limbs moved with a wet, clicking sound, like a joint being forced back into its socket. It looked at me. Beneath the hood, the face was almost human, but the skin was the color of raw dough, and the eyes were placed just an inch too wide apart. It didn't have a nose, just 2 vertical slits that hissed as it breathed. And then it spoke. It used Marcus's voice perfectly, down to the slight stutter Marcus has when he's tired. Elias, why are you counting? We're all right here. Are you calm? Are you high? You high? You high? You high? 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 Marcus turned around, his face turning ghostly pale as he saw the thing standing inches away from him. The creature didn't attack. It just tilted its head, its neck stretching unnaturally long, and let out a soft, melodic whistle, the same three-note tune we'd been using to signal each other all day. "Nobody move," I said, my voice barely a rasp. I didn't reach for my knife. I didn't reach for the bear spray. In the deep woods, sudden movements are an invitation, and whatever was standing behind Marcus didn't look like it wanted an invitation. It looked like it was waiting for an opening. The air around the fire had changed. The smell of burning hemlock was gone, replaced by a thick, cloying scent of wet fur and old copper. It was the smell of a slaughterhouse that had been left out in the rain. The temperature dropped so fast I could see the steam rising from the coffee in Leo's hand. Marcus was frozen. He could feel the creature's breath on the back of his neck. It was a rhythmic, wet sound, like someone stepping through deep mud. "Marcus, walk toward me." "Slowly," I commanded, keeping my eyes locked on those wide-set ink pit eyes. Marcus started to move, but as he did, the creature shifted its weight. It mimicked his movement perfectly. When Marcus took a step with his left foot, the thing took a step with its left. It was like a shadow that had gained mass and decided to stop being a reflection. "Elias," Marcus stammered, his stutter coming back in full force. It's touching my shoulder." "I know. Keep coming." Julian and Sarah had backed away from the fire, their flashlights cutting through the dark. The beams hit the creature, and for a second, the uncanny became unbearable. The high-visibility vest it wore wasn't cloth. It was a part of its skin, a leathery orange membrane that had grown to resemble our gear. It wasn't wearing clothes. It was becoming our clothes. Then, the thing did something that made the bile rise in my throat. It giggled. It was Marcus's giggle. High, nervous, and youthful. "Julian, get the keys! We're moving to the truck! Now!" I yelled. We scrambled. We didn't pack the tents. We didn't grab the gear. We just ran toward the 4x4 parked 100 yards down the trail. I kept my flashlight behind us, the beam bouncing off the ancient oaks. Every time the light hit the brush, I saw them. Not one, not two, but a dozen silhouettes, all wearing orange vests, all standing perfectly still behind the trees. They weren't chasing us. They were just there, waiting. We reached the truck and piled in. Julian slammed the locks. We sat there in the cabin, the only sound being our frantic breathing and the ticking of the cooling engine. "Is everyone here?" I gasped, my lungs burning from the humid air. "I'm here," Julian said. "Here," Sarah whispered. I'm here." Marcus choked out from the back seat. I turned around to check the back. Marcus was there, huddled against the door. Next to him was Leo, and next to Leo was another Marcus. They looked identical, same ruffled hair, same mud-stained jacket, same terrified expression. Both of them were staring at me with tears in their eyes. "Elias, he's not me," the Marcus on the left screamed. "Elias, don't let him in! I'm Marcus!" The Marcus on the right cried out at the exact same time in the exact same tone. The smell of wet fur filled the cab of the truck, so thick it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I looked at the rearview mirror and saw a fifth person sitting in the very back cargo area, hidden in the shadows. It didn't say a word. It just started to whistle that three-note tune. The Shadow in the Head Count, Part 3. The Geometric Choice. The interior of the 4X4 felt like it was shrinking. The air was heavy, saturated with that cloying scent of copper and wet fur, making every breath a struggle. Outside, the fog had pressed against the glass, thick and white, turning the world into a void. We were trapped in a metal box with a mathematical impossibility. I didn't turn around again. I kept my eyes on the rear-view mirror, watching the two versions of Marcus. They were shivering in perfect synchronization. Even the way the sweat rolled down their temples was identical. It wasn't just a visual trick. It was a total biological theft. Julian, don't unlock the doors, no matter what, I said, my voice steady, despite the hammer of my heart against my ribs. Elias, what do we do? Sarah's voice was high, brittle. She was clutching her sharpening stone so hard her knuckles were white. One of them isn't right. I looked at the Marcus on the left, then the Marcus on the right. Marcus, I said, tell me the name of the creek where we took the soil samples 3 days ago. Wolf, Wolf, Run, the one on the left said. Wolf, Wolf, Run, the one on the right echoed. Their voices occupied the same frequency, creating a vibrating chord in the small cabin. Then, the figure in the cargo area, the one I couldn't quite see, shifted. The sound it made was like a heavy wet bag being dragged over gravel. It leaned forward, its face coming just into the edge of the dome light. It wasn't Marcus. It was me. It had my gray-flecked beard. It had the small scar over my left eyebrow from a logging accident in '02. It even had my NPS issue hat, but the fabric looked like it was made of translucent, veined skin. It looked at me through the mirror, and for a split second, I felt a sickening pull, as if my own identity was being drained through the reflection. The math is off. Elias, my own voice whispered from the back. 6 is too many. Off. Math, 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 math. We need to reduce the count. 4. The two Marcuses started to scream, but they didn't scream like men. They started to emit a high-pitched, rhythmic trill, the sound of a hawk's cry, played backward. Their jaws didn't just open, they unhinged, their skin stretching like wet rubber. "Sarah! The flare!" I yelled. I reached back, not for a person, but for the space between them. I grabbed the heavy, iron-bound radio from the center console and slammed it into the dome light, shattering the bulb. Total darkness swallowed us. In the blackness, the smell of copper intensified until it was suffocating. I felt a hand brush against my neck, a hand with too many joints, cold and slick like a fish. "Get out!" I roared, throwing my weight against the driver's side door. "Everyone out of the truck! Run for the clearing!" I didn't wait to see who followed. I burst out into the fog, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I could hear the sounds of the others scrambling behind me, the heavy thuds of boots on the damp earth. But as I ran, I realized the sounds weren't behind me. They were all around me, a dozen sets of footsteps, all matching my pace, all moving with the same heavy rhythmic gait of a man in work boots. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I was standing in the middle of the trail, the fog so thick I couldn't see my own hands. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal of my lighter. I struck it. The small orange flame flickered. Standing in a perfect circle around me were 5 figures: Julian, Sarah, Leo, and 2 Marcuses. They were all standing perfectly still, their heads tilted at the same 45-degree angle. And they were all whistling that 3-note tune. The lighter flame danced in the damp air, casting long, jittery shadows against the wall of fog. Around me, the 5 figures remained motionless. Their faces were mine, Julian's, Sarah's, but they were flat, like a photograph printed on gray meat. The orange of their vests pulsed in time with that rhythmic, wet breathing. I knew I couldn't outrun them. If they could mimic my gait and my voice, they could mimic my speed. I had to find the wrong element, the one detail their mimicry couldn't grasp. I looked at the ground. The fog was thin enough near the soil to see the boots. My boots were caked in the red clay of the lower ridge. The Julian standing to my left had boots that were perfectly clean, despite the 5-mile trek through the mud. The Sarah to my right had a knife sheath on the wrong side of her hip. And then I saw it. The Marcus on the far left was breathing, a real, ragged breath that came with a puff of white vapor in the cold air. The others, the things, weren't breathing. They were just producing the sound of breath from somewhere deep inside their chests. "Marcus," I whispered, the flame of my lighter burning down toward my thumb. "When the light goes out, run toward the sound of the creek. Don't look back. Don't count. Just run." I didn't wait for a response. I flicked the lighter closed. The darkness slammed into us like a physical wall. I heard the wet, clicking sound of the things unfolding, their limbs snapping as they dropped to all fours. I didn't run for the truck. I ran toward the Marcus, who breathed, grabbing a handful of his jacket and pulling him toward the sound of rushing water. Behind us, the woods erupted in a cacophony of our own voices. My voice, Julian's, Sarah's, all screaming in pain, all laughing, all reciting the safety protocols of the forestry firm. It was a hurricane of sound designed to make us stop, to make us turn around and check on the others. We hit the water of Wolf Run Creek, the icy flow numbing my legs instantly. I didn't stop until we reached the main fire road, miles away, where the first gray light of dawn was finally breaking the canopy. I sat on the gravel, my chest heaving, watching the tree line. Marcus sat next to me, his face buried in his hands. He was shaking, a deep, bone-rattling tremor. We made it, Elias," he whispered. His voice was thick, exhausted. I looked at him, really looked at him. He had the red clay on his boots. He had the stutter. He had the smell of sweat and fear, not copper. "Yeah," I said, leaning back against a pine tree. We made it. I stayed with the firm for another month, just long enough to file the missing persons reports for Julian, Sarah, and Leo. The official report cited a flash flood or a predatory animal attack. I didn't argue. I didn't tell them about the orange vests that weren't cloth. I live in the city now, miles away from the nearest tree line. I work a desk job, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the constant reassuring roar of traffic. I thought I'd left the forest behind. But yesterday, I was standing in line at a coffee shop. It was crowded, noisy, and perfectly normal. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, expecting a stranger. It was Marcus. He looked good, better than he had in years. He smiled at me, a wide, perfect smile. "Hey, Elias," he said. "Long time. We should get the old crew back together. Do a head count." I started to smile back, but then I looked down at his hands. He was holding a paper cup, the steam rising from the lid. But even in the warm shop, there was no vapor coming from his mouth when he spoke. And as he walked away, I noticed his shoes brand new work boots, without a single speck of dust or city grime on them. I went home and locked my door. I sat in the dark, listening to the silence of my apartment. Then, from the air vent in my ceiling, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic whistling. 1, 2, 3. The math never adds up anymore, because once you've been counted by the woods, they never stop trying to finish the set.